worshiping with us on YouTube. This week, this Thursday, there's going to be a special opportunity that Bob McKay, who not only is a member of our church, but in the Lions Club, is going to tell us about for certain folks. Bob.
This coming Thursday, the Lions Club is going to have Thanksgiving dinner for seniors here in Marlboro. And back over the summer, we normally had a big seniors picnic up at the park, but this year because of COVID we couldn't. So what we did is we distributed the barbecue lunches to all the, I don't know, 130 or something, 140 maybe, seniors all over the town. And they decided to do the same thing again for Thanksgiving. So this Thursday we're going to use the lecture room downstairs. All the food is going to be cooked at all remote locations, brought in, and on the tables we just put everything together, put them all in bags, and then there's lists and there's drivers that show up and they take them all out in the living room. So last time we did it was about 20 people here putting it all together, and it was a great success. So we're doing it again for Thanksgiving. Anyway.
Sounds terrific.
Yeah.
And then what time was that for the seniors to drive through?
I think they're going to start here around 2 o'clock or something.
Around 2 o'clock on this Thursday. Very good. It's brisk. It's brisk. For those who are on YouTube, you don't know how chilly it is in here, but people have blue lips because we've got windows open and air circulating. You might want to bring a lap blanket, keep it on your pew, have it just to warm up. We're not going to toast the sanctuary and then open the windows and freeze it. So we appreciate your fortitude in worshiping, even though it is so terribly chilly. Any other announcements to be highlighted today? Then let us worship. Oh, wait. Yep. Okay. Then let us worship God.
Okay, this is a call to worship. We look to you, O God, who dwells in the heavens. As a man servant looks to his master, and a maidservant to her mistress. We look to you, O God of mercy. We come to you filled with contempt and pride, counting on your mercy. Lord, ease our minds and spirits, and strip away the pride that separates us from you. Fill us with knowledge and sureness of your mercy as we worship together.
Let us pray. O God, in Jesus Christ, you have made us sons and daughters of light. You welcomed us into our existence with gifts and talents. We see you, O Lord, celebrated each day in our accomplishments and inventions. Our ever-increasing knowledge announces your willingness to let us see the many facets of your creation in us and around us. Keep us ever alert, O God, to your glory. Amen.
Passing of the peace. Called to live as children of light, let us build one another up as we share signs of peace and words of love. Let us celebrate this love by sharing signs of Christ's peace.
May the peace of Christ be with you. Limits. I need to ask you something. You can just stay right there. Lennox, what's your favorite thing in the world? What's your favorite object? The favorite thing that's yours, uniquely yours. What is the favorite thing that is uniquely yours? Your family. you this, Max. If you love your family so much, do you guys have a garage at your house? Would you take your family, would you take your mom and your dad and your brothers, and would you just say, go to the garage and I'm going to lock that door and I'll be back in 5 years. See you later. No! No, you would not put them away somewhere. You would spend as much time with them as you could. Sure, because you find them precious. Well, there was a time when there was a man who gave the people who worked for him, he gave each of them something very precious. And a couple of the people, they went out and it was money. They went out and they took that money and they did something with it. And they got more money back. But one of the men, he took money and he just put it in the ground and he buried it. And then the boss, when he came back, he said, so what'd you guys do with the money? And this one guy said, well, you gave me $5, and look, I've got $10 now to give back to you. And this other guy said, well, you gave me $3, and I did something with it. Now I've got $6, and I'm giving it back to you. And then the third guy said, you only gave me $1. I just put that in the ground, and here it is. Here's your lousy $1 back. And it was just... The boss couldn't figure out why they would do that, So let us pray. Dear God, you tell us that when you give us something precious, we want to have as much time with the people or the things that we have. And help us to be wise, to spend as much time as possible, and to hold precious that which you hold dear. Amen.
spoke to them, saying, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, another 2, and another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing the 5 more talents, saying, "Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, "Master, you handed over the 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master." Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, "Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours." But his master replied, "You wicked and lazy slave, did you that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." This is the Lord's word. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Get rid of the offering. That's what Grant Copeland, a pastor down in Florida, has suggested, and maybe Stewardship Month is not a good time to introduce that thought. But he made a case for it with his congregation in Tallahassee. If we look carefully about what the concept of an offering is, we might even inspire greater commitment toward our overall Christian discipleship. Liturgically speaking, the offering has nothing to do with money. In its purest form, the offering is understood as Christ. Christ on the cross offers a living sacrifice. Christ is in the Lord's Supper offers a spiritual presence in this time and place. The true offering is Christ. The offering's original purpose in the service of worship was to allow time for worshipers to focus on Christ. And this was done by having a symbolic reenactment of the Christ event. An offertory procession involved bringing the bread and the wine forward in the service of worship and placed on the table to remind Christians of the body and blood of our risen Lord. In the 2nd century, the offering was a religious offering, not a monetary one. And the original offering processional of carrying the bread and wine to the worship leader demonstrated the Christian belief that Christ has died, Christ is risen, and Christ The elements were offered as the gifts of God for the people of God. The gifts of God for the people of God. Christ had been offered as a living sacrifice. Therefore, Christians in worship were encouraged to heed Paul's words to the Christians of Rome. Paul wrote, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." So the offering initially was in worship the time when the bread and the wine was brought forward and placed on the table. Christ, the true offering, was perceived to be spiritually present in the elements of the bread and the wine. And likewise, when receiving the Lord's Supper, Christians were invited to make of their lives a living sacrifice of spiritual worship. Century after century passed with the offering procession maintaining this Eucharistic shape and form, but by the Middle Ages it was abundantly clear that the offering had changed. Included in the worship service was a dramatic presentation of giving money. And we continue to this day the practice of the Middle Ages of having the offering procession focus on our gifts of money. And we've gone beyond the tradition of the Middle Ages. Not only have we added the process of giving money, we have removed the procession of the bread and the wine. On those Sundays when we have communion, the elements are placed on the table before worship commences. And on those Sundays when we don't have communion, the elements of the bread and wine are not present at all. And we do have the baptismal font, which is our other sacrament of this church, but we don't have the elements for the Lord's Supper. And in many churches, not ours, but in many churches, the table is used as an altar where the money is then placed. The offering procession, originally intended as a ritual to remind us of the presence of Christ, has become instead a procession to demonstrate our presence in relationship with God. Brant Copeland, the pastor who wants to get rid of the contemporary offering procession, concedes that it accomplishes 4 tasks. The way we do offering now symbolizes the offering of our lives to God. It dramatizes the congregation's financial stewardship. It reminds the members to support the church budget. And it gets the money to the front of sanctuary. And we make great fanfare of our offering. We have special music that dramatizes the moment. And even though we're instructed not to make a show of our gifts, we do. And I'm not just picking on us in Marlboro. That's just standard operating procedure in most of the churches today. And yet it was in the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus taught, whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your Father who is in secret will reward you. We are taught by Jesus not to be showy when we give our alms. And yet, when there is no pandemic, we make a grand display of our gift giving each Sunday. And while the gifts are being received, we have a glorious offertory. And when the money is brought forward, we resoundingly sing the doxology. Well, in other churches, they resoundingly sing the little choir in our version. But realize that when Jesus provides instruction on the appropriate way to present alms, he does not prohibit the gift. Jesus supports the idea of giving money. He simply encourages humility when making the gift. And this teaching about The giving of alms by Jesus is informative because it helps us to understand the evolution of our offering practice. If we look at the progression of our Judeo-Christian tradition, there have been three distinct ways of giving money: alms, tithes, and a collection. There used to be three different things. Alms were intended specifically for the poor. We've heard that expression, alms for the poor. And poor in its, alms in its Greek form means mercy. Individuals address the needs of the poor by giving alms. The money was given directly to an individual in need, or it was placed in an alms box outside the temple. And the money was used to buy food or other items for those in need, typically the widows and the orphans, the sick, and the poor. And the persons who collected the alms and made the purchases and distributed the goods were known as almoners. Almoners. That's not a word we use today. But we do have almoners in our church, and they are deacons. They carry out that role in the Christian church today. Alms were the funds given for the poor, and it was a part of the religious code of Judaism that required good works. Alms were one of the three forms of money giving in the early church. Tithes were different from alms. Tithes were given to support the temple. A modern application of tithes would be the portion of the money that keeps the church doors open, pays for the lights, pays for the heat, pays for the paving of the driveway, the physical plant, the utilities, the salaries. And you may have noticed in this past decade, when I call for the offering, I usually say, let us now bring forth our tithes and our offerings. While a tithe is commonly known as a 10% fraction, historically, it was considered to be that portion of the funds of the church that went toward the maintenance of the institution. Alms and tithes were distinct, as was the collection. The collection was an opportunity for the religious community to make a corporate gesture of giving. Together, the money of the believers was collected, probably at the end of the worship service, or even after the worship ritual had been concluded. In the 2nd century, Justin Martyr wrote about the collection, saying, "Those who prosper and who so wish contribute each as much as he chooses to. What is collected is deposited with the president and takes care of the orphans and widows and those who are in want on account of sickness or any other cause, and those who are in bonds, and the strangers who are sojourners among us. And briefly, he is the protector of all those in need." So the collection of the early church was not for the church itself. The collection was given to others on behalf of the church in the name of Christ. So the three forms of giving money in ancient days were alms, tithes, and the collections. None of these in the early church were considered to be the offering. The offering was the presentation of the bread and the wine. In our modern worship, when we call for tithes and offerings, we blend into one moment 2,000 years of Christian practices. And while my colleague in Florida is bold to suggest we get rid of the offering in modern form, I am not so brave. Copeland wants to see churches have an alms box at the door of the sanctuary, and he would like for tithes designated for the church itself to be received in plates or baskets during worship and held by the ushers without bringing them forward during the service. But The pastor's exception to these suggestions is on Sundays when we have the Lord's Supper. On those occasions,